that you're working out or kind of finishing out, things and experiences that you've had in the physical world. This would be very similar to like sleep at night, when the experiences of the day are still kind of working around in the machinery of your subconscious. So she remarked on this because she says, for the most part, spirits don't like being contacted. They don't like being bothered, and they really aren't even interested in sending any information back to the physical plane, and in most cases will lie, make things up, or just play a joke on the human because they don't want to be bothered. It seems to be an attitude they have once they're separated from the physical body. So the Plejadians don't make any effort to contact the dead. They see nothing helpful about it. She did remark that it can be useful and helpful in some areas once the individual is spiritually developed enough where he can contact higher forms of life. But that's very rare because very few people know how to do it. But in that event, you could contact a higher form of life, a being of higher consciousness and higher knowledge, which, if that being was interested, could transmit knowledge back to you and educate you. The drawback seems to be that it's very difficult to do, and in most cases, a being of higher consciousness will have little interest in sending you any information, and that information that they send may be too much for you. There's something to this learning thing that you should get information when you need it. If you are working on a particular problem in life and need to solve it, then information pertaining to that problem is useful at the time. If you receive information about something that you don't need, it's not useful. Or if the information is not of the right type, if it is too high information, if it is information that doesn't pertain to the learning steps that you need at the moment, it may only cause frustration, anger, or whatever, and it's not really of any use to you. So it's not a great answer either, just assume that you can contact higher forms of consciousness and that it's going to be a wonderful thing for you. So there are problems at contacting the spirit world. Semyasi then suggested that it might be a while before she gets back to Billy because they have a special mission going. They've apparently been doing some work on Mars and watching something's going on Mars in 1975 that they're very fascinated with, and she wouldn't tell Billy. It was very clear throughout the context that on many occasions, well actually quite often, they were very open to Billy that they would not tell him certain things, that they would eliminate information from him on purpose so he would only be hearing the things that he needed to hear for his mission. They would purposefully eliminate information about governments and so forth that he didn't need to know. One, they didn't want people to get the information out of him accidentally. And two, they felt it was a form of protection. If he didn't know something, then he wouldn't be considered, a threat to a government organization. They also informed him on quite a few occasions that they would only tell him part of a truth. It became obvious in some areas of information where they would only tell him half of the truth, and he wouldn't even know that. They would just tell him part of an explanation, and later on he would find out there's more to it, and he'd want to know why they didn't tell him the rest of it. And that came up a couple of times, and she just remarked that they had decided that in each area of information they would only tell him certain things, and they would only tell him enough information for what he needed to know at the time. So right here they're already dealing with him on a need-to-know sort of basis. When you sum this up with the way they talk to Billy and so forth, it's plain to see that they regard Billy almost like an experiment or a test case in some cases, where they're trying out to see what he can do, what he can understand. They then feed him information. Like at this point in the context, they were very adamant about him doing public speaking, about getting certain informations out. They were very adamant about him wanting to go out speaking about the ozone problem. And Billy kept kind of balking. He didn't want to do this. He did not want to go out speaking in the public. It's just doesn't suit his personality well. You'd think they'd catch on to that. After you meet Billy only for a little while, you can see right away he's not the public speaking type. Billy's your little guru type. He's the kind of guy you seek out in a quiet cave somewhere and have a beautiful, wonderful, loving conversation with. But he's not your public speaking type. If he was speaking in a crowd, you would probably need, for one, you need a translator, and you would probably need some visual aids or things to help him out. It's not his forte. Well, anyway, as I was mentioning, she told him that it was going to be a while before the next contact because events on Mars were going on and something new was happening. The Apollo Soyuz hookup was getting ready to happen. the Russians and the Americans were planning a joint capsule venture or satellite venture in space. Billy was a little surprised because he had been told by the Plejadians that was not going to happen until years later. So apparently their future view can be off too. They were surprised that events had moved forward so fast and they were getting ready to happen. And she commented that they were very, very concerned and wanted to be careful about this mission because they didn't want the Russians or the Americans to learn certain things. That they were concerned that on this mission that the Americans or the Russian team, the scientist team, may come about certain knowledges and cognitions which could be dangerous to mankind, they said. They were afraid that some of this information they may learn in space, if fallen into the wrong hands, could provide entirely too much power to either the Russians or the Americans. Apparently they say that both the Russians and the Americans were already working on so-called doomsday machines, technologies that were very advanced and could actually cause the destruction of the Earth itself, all in the name of peace, of course. She mentioned to Billy that on several occasions on different Apollo missions and even on Earth under certain projects that they would interfere from time to time, causing these projects to go astray, causing the scientists to suddenly lose their memory or certain things to happen so that the projects couldn't be finished in order to slow down the progress of scientists. This was generally always done in areas where it was military oriented, where scientists were working on something for the military that would be harmful to the planet Earth. So they are affording us some measure of protection, and they are staying involved in certain areas. They are interfering, just plain interfering in our development in certain areas, which I hope is helpful. One other question before we stop this contact was Billy was concerned that other ETs were also coming here also, and what, these other ETs that come to Earth that the Plejadians are telling them about, what kind of effect does this have on people? Because there are other people like George Adamski's and other people who are claiming to have contacts, and Billy says, how can you be so sure that they're not? Well, Semyosi told him that yes, there are other splinter groups of the Plejadians, one in particular called Bafath, B-A-F-A-T-H, we're going to hear more about as we go through the contact notes. There are other groups that continuously do contact human beings from time to time. This one particular group, the Bafath, seems to be very well organized, and it is their MO, their modus operandum, to infiltrate religious leaders and political leaders and instill thoughts of grandeur and ego into their minds, causing them to do certain things. They particularly play on religious leaders, they say, because people who follow religions, that their minds are oriented to being a follower, to being a servant, to worship, to be on their knees, to information and so forth. These people are easily controlled. And if through religious leaders they can implant thoughts into these people, then they can control their thoughts. Apparently, the Bafath, for years, a small group, much smaller than the whole Pleiadian nation, has been concerned and has been trying to control the planet Earth through force. They can't openly do this because their existence would be confronted, of course, by the Pleiadians and the others that protect the planet. But the Bafath seem to be doing their dirty work on the side. We'll learn later on that even back in the 50s, there was a large group of people, a list provided to Billy when he was a teenager, of over 700 religious and political leaders around Earth that were being broadcast delusions during their sleep and so forth by the Bafath. Our subconscious is very open and susceptible when we're sleeping, and it's possible for these beings and for the Pleiadians to literally push information, ideas, and thoughts and dreams into our thoughts, and we will have no idea where they come from. You'll think it's your own decision-making. So this could be, of course, be very dangerous, and she told Billy that, yes, it is happening, but they really can't do anything about it. For one, they don't know when it's happening. They can't detect